What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Just wanted to remind you guys that if you end up enjoying this video, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. All of that ensures that the videos will do well and also ensures that I can continue to make these daily videos for a long time to come without having to stop or take any breaks or anything. If you guys have any thoughts about the stories in this video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about recording these is reading your guys' thoughts on the stories therein. Because of my neck issue, the mega compilations will still be 2 hours long, but for the foreseeable future, the other regular daily videos will be about 30 minutes or so. Without further ado though guys, I will let you enjoy the next 30 minutes of true scary stories, and I will see you again at the end of the video. I'm an Uber driver in my city, and was working a later shift than usual on this night. I had something come up in the morning, so I didn't get started until well past 8 p.m. or so. This was my first time ever working that late, so I didn't really know what to expect as far as how busy or not busy it was going to be. I got my answer pretty quickly though, because by 11 p.m. I'd only done 4 drives. I was even thinking about switching over to Uber Eats for the night and seeing if I'd have better luck on there. Just as I was about to do so, another pickup request came through. It was a 35-minute drive, which was good for me because it meant I'd get paid more. I accepted it and pulled up into the pickup location. It was a train station a few minutes away from me. I drove through the parking lot slowly, looking around for any signs of the person I was meant to pick up. After making a full circle through the lot though, and still not seeing them anywhere, I parked and decided to wait. There wasn't a single car in the parking lot. I don't even think any passenger trains were running at this time of night. I thought maybe they might have set the wrong location or something. But before I could even text them, I saw a man approaching my car. He had a dark sweatshirt on with the hood pulled over his head, and aside from confirming the ride was for him, he didn't speak at all. I began the drive, and the man stayed quiet in the back seat, not even taking his phone out or anything. He just sat there dead-eyed looking straight ahead. I didn't want to be that driver that always tries to make annoying conversation, so I just drove and stayed quiet. While driving, a couple of times I glanced back at him in the mirror, and his eyes were just staring directly back at me. This wasn't an uncommon occurrence when driving people around, but for some reason with this guy it felt incredibly unnerving. He didn't look away or blink either. He would just stare at me until I looked away. After a pretty unsettling 35-minute drive, I finally got to the drop-off location. It wasn't an address actually. It was a specific location the man had pinpointed on the map. And this specific location just so happened to be at the end of an open field that was completely covered in dense fog. I looked in the mirror, seeing the guy staying in the car and not making any attempt to move at all. "Get out!" Not sure if I'd heard him right. I turned my body and looked at him. He looked me in the eyes with a terrifying stare and said it once more. "Get out!" I felt my body tense up. And before I could even think of what to do, I saw from the corner of my eye multiple other men running up to my car. There were 2 or 3 of them, all holding bats or knives and wearing dark hoodies that covered their faces. They swarmed my car. Just as I put it into drive, they were able to get the back 2 doors open and tried to jump in. The man inside the car was yelling at me and trying to reach over and open my door, probably to push me out or something. As I started gaining some speed though, and getting away from the group, the man inside fell into the back seat again and then jumped out onto the road. All the men disappeared into the fog right after. I kept going though. I pulled into a gas station a few miles down the road. Both of my back doors were still open, swinging around wildly. There were dents all over my car. While I was driving, an officer met me at the gas station to take my report, and another went to the field it happened in. Of course, the whole group was nowhere to be found. They did find a phone on the road, though, which is the one that had been used to book the Uber. It probably fell out of the man's pocket when he jumped from my car. It turned out to be a phone that had been reported stolen, though, not even an hour before I'd picked the guy up. This seemed to all be an elaborate plan to rob someone. It's hard to assume they would have just let me go with no harm done, though. They probably would have done something to ensure they had the time to get away in my car without getting caught. I don't know what would have happened, but I do know I barely managed to get away that night. Earlier this spring, I was camping in the woods 4 hours north of where I live. There was a small lake there that I'd go to a lot. It was never crowded or even really known about. I don't think so, at least. It made for a nice, peaceful getaway. Every time I went, when I got there on the first day and set everything up, nobody else would ever be there. The lake wasn't too big and was surrounded by a grassy beach area with woods all around it. It had a good view of the shores all around the lake. Not too long after I arrived this time, I saw a man emerge from the woods on the other side and set up a tent. He looked like your average camper, really, and was keeping to himself for the first little while before sundown. Eventually, though, I saw him making his way around the lake and over toward my campsite. He had a friendly smile and introduced himself as William. He said he wasn't sure if I saw him set up camp or not, but he'd seen me from across the lake and just wanted to come over and say hi, since we were both out here in the middle of nowhere. He said it was a lake nobody usually came to, so he'd never met anyone out here before. We talked for a while, and he seemed really cool, actually. William said he was 26, which was around the same age as me. We both seemed to like this camping spot because of how secluded it was. After talking for 30 minutes, he went back to the other side of the lake as the sun was finally setting down. Not much else happened that night, but in the morning we ended up talking and hanging out, and did so for most of the rest of the day. He shared a 6-pack of beers with me, and we sat on the beach and had some good casual conversations. When we went back to our tents at the end of the day, I was sitting by my small campfire. I was thinking that I was really happy I'd met William. He seemed like the perfect buddy to go camping with. Maybe some other time. As it got later, though, I started getting ready to stomp out the fire and go to bed when I saw William walking around the lake. His campfire had gone out a while ago, so I thought he would be in his tent already sleeping. Apparently not, though. He walked up to my campfire, and right away something seemed different about him. "Hey, everything good, man?" I said. He smiled and suddenly seemed back to how he was before. He said he came over to ask me if I wanted to see a cool spot he had found that had a really great view. I told him it was kind of late to be going out, but he assured me that the view was only so great because it was so dark out. The way he was hyping it up made me feel like I couldn't miss out on this. What would be the point of going camping out in the woods if I passed up all the good views? I got up and followed him to the other side of the lake, then trailed behind him as he led us through the woods. There was no path or anything, really. So pretty quickly I knew that whatever spot this was, William had to have been there many times before to know the exact way, without getting lost in the dark. We walked for maybe 15 minutes before William started slowing down. He pointed ahead and smiled, like this was the view he was talking about. When I walked out in front of him and looked to see, though, there was only a small structure. An old RV or camper of some sort. that looked like it had been abandoned and succumbed to the elements for years. Moss was all over it, and holes and rust covered the entire side. I turned back to look at William, wondering what was going on, but his face was now cold and empty. He looked like a completely different person. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked. He didn't answer. Feeling a rush of fear, I started looking around. That's when I heard the rusty metal door swing open behind me. I only saw for a split second as someone else came running out and started charging at me. I began to sprint away. I could hear both William and the other person following close behind. I gave all of my strength to keep running until I thought I'd lost them. By then, I'd run out so far into the woods, though, that I had no idea where I actually was. I kept on walking, keeping my eyes on the trees until the sun came up. By the time I found my way back to the lake, I saw from the tree line that all of my camping gear was gone. It looked as if I had never even been there. I stayed hidden and got back on the trail, making it back to my car eventually. I made a report with the local police, but they never mentioned finding anything. I don't know if they even really looked, to be honest with you. What those two had planned for me that night is horrifying to think about, but at least I got away before having to witness it firsthand. This happened in July of last year. My house was having some pretty big problems, and as a result, I was left without any power for several days while it was getting repaired. I worked from home, so obviously this was a major issue. I ultimately had to rent out an Airbnb to stay at for a few days, at least until the power was back on in my home. I don't exactly live in the biggest city, so there weren't too many options for Airbnbs near me. The closest one that was at a reasonable price was about a 45-minute drive from my home. It was in an even smaller and more secluded area, which was often referred to as not the best section of my city to live in. I would only be staying there for a few days, though, so the amount that I was saving seemed worth it. When I arrived, I went right inside and basically straight to bed, exhausted from everything going on in my life. The next morning, I got up early and started setting up my laptop in my workspace. Just before I had to start work, though, there was a knock at the door. I debated on whether or not to even open it, because it wasn't even my house. I thought that maybe it might be the host or something. I went over and checked to see who it was. On the porch was a man in his early 30s, covered in tattoos. He didn't look like the Airbnb host or even a salesperson, really. I was unsure as to why he would even be here, and not really wanting to know, I figured he'd just leave if I walked away from the door. I went back to my desk and finished getting ready and started some work. I had some meetings and a lot of things to catch up on from my absence the last few days. I don't think I left my desk a single time until 8 p.m., and even then I was considering going back to work after going up and picking up some dinner. Only a couple of minutes after I got back and started eating, though, another knock came at the door. I immediately got up and went to check who it was, and wasn't too surprised to see it was the same guy from before. What could this random guy possibly want from me this late in the day? I was actually more bothered than I was concerned. Again, I just walked away from the door and went back to eating my dinner. After 30 minutes, I decided to work for at least another hour. I was tired, but the work I had to get done was a lot, and I knew that putting it off until tomorrow would just make me even more stressed out. I put my headphones in and tried to focus for the next hour or so. I got a lot done, and once I was satisfied, I finally closed my laptop for the night. I hadn't realized just how dark it had gotten in the meantime, though. I guess my laptop screen was the only light I had on. I went to the front and flicked on the light. A chill instantly rushed through me. Going down the front hallway were faint but unmistakable shoe prints. Looking around, they were all over the place, even going right up behind the desk where I had been working. Terrified, I slowly followed them over to the back door, which had been popped open. I don't even know how to describe what I was feeling. It was pure horror. Only moments after this, footsteps started coming down the stairs. They were slow and careful, as if trying not to be caught. When they got to the bottom, a man peered out into the hallway and looked directly at me. It was the same man, easily distinguishable with all his tattoos and everything. He looked surprised to see me moving around. That surprise quickly turned into rage. His face had no emotions other than irritation and anger. I was going to try to say something to placate the man, but no words came out. My heart started pounding in my chest as I turned around and sprinted out the back door. I ran through the backyard and out into some trees far behind the houses. I hid behind one of them and pulled out my phone to start dialing 911. I quickly closed it when I heard footsteps running toward me. I hadn't expected them to follow me outside, but luckily they passed by without finding me. They continued to run out into the dark. Once I got in contact with the police, I went back inside the Airbnb and waited for them. I gave a detailed description of the man, and they actually found him the very next day to my surprise. It was actually confirmed to be him by the tattoos I'd noticed. He'd actually broken into several homes in the days leading up to this, doing horrible things to those who lived in them. I don't know what he was planning to do to me, or why he seemed to have left me alone at first, but I can rest easy knowing he won't be able to do such things ever again. I'm a 26-year-old woman. It was in October of last year when this happened. The weather was getting colder, and we had a few days in a row of constant raining. I didn't really mind much, as I spent most of my time working from home anyway. This particular day, I had gotten up early and started work around 1 p.m. later in the day. I was interrupted from my Zoom meeting, though, by the power suddenly shutting off. I knew right away it was the power to my entire house, not just my computer, because all the lights had gone out too. I quickly grabbed up my phone and used it as a light source, then went over to the window to see if the neighbors were blacked out too. It was really dark outside because of the clouds and heavy rain, but I could see that all the houses nearby still seemed to have all of their lights on. Now I was actually a little worried that something was actually wrong with my home. I left the room and went downstairs, getting a better flashlight and heading into the unfinished basement. I maneuvered around in the dark through my stacked up storage boxes until I got to the electrical panel. The main power switch was in the off position. I'm not too experienced with these sorts of things. I flicked it back to the on position and everything immediately lit up again and seemed to be working perfectly fine. I figured it must have been an electrical short or something. I shut the panel and went back upstairs to my office, then waited for the internet and everything to get running again. I rejoined the Zoom call and got back to work. I was at my desk for the rest of the afternoon, working late to prepare a presentation for tomorrow. I didn't finally close my computer until 8 p.m. or so. The storm was going just as bad, but it was way darker outside now. That made every flash of lightning beam through the windows. I got up from my desk and opened my office door, but as I left the room, I heard a few strange bumps from downstairs. I didn't think it was anything more than something blowing into the side of the house initially, but as I got to the bottom of the stairs, the power shut off once again. It caught me by surprise, even scaring me a bit. I stood there for a moment and listened for anything that might have caused it. It was eerily silent, aside from the rain and thunder. Even the bumps I'd been hearing just moments ago had stopped as well. I went over and grabbed my flashlight again. I made my way over to the basement door, opened it, and walked down to the bottom of the steps. The sound of the storm was way louder than I was expecting, echoing through the room in a way it hadn't before. I shined the flashlight around and started walking through the various boxes toward the electrical panel. On the floor below, there was a puddle of water. I was shocked, but I don't think it had really set in yet as to what that meant. I got closer and pointed the light all around the floor, seeing more and more wet areas on the concrete. That was when my light fell on a few stacked up boxes. Above them was a window, and that window was wide open. Water was flowing down the wall into the basement. My heart was racing. I approached it and saw there were muddy shoe prints on top of the boxes, like someone had used it as a stool to climb in and out of the window. I spun around frantically, flashing my light all throughout the basement area. I was terrified I would find someone hiding behind the boxes and watching me. Instead of sticking around any longer to figure that out, though, I sprinted up the stairs and ran to the first floor. I grabbed my keys and locked myself in the car, then called the police. They arrived 10 minutes later, clearing out the entire house. They didn't find anyone, but they did confirm that someone had broken in, finding that someone had undone the screws to the window pane. The police set it back into place to prevent any more flooding, but after I gave my statement, they basically just said to update them if I had any new information. There was nothing else they could really do. Now I'm left with no idea who broke in or what they were trying to do. Even more unsettling is the fact that it must have been them that shut off the power earlier in the day. They had likely been in my basement, only a few feet from me and hiding in the dark. I had no idea. That could mean they had been in my house for hours, and yet I still can't find any reasons for why they did all of this. In 2018, I went through a divorce that left me basically without anything. I managed to move into a small home, but had nothing to fill it in with. I needed furniture, appliances, literally everything. Obviously, this is a big task to take on, especially financially. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to get some discounted stuff on Craigslist. My priority at the moment was on big things like the couch, TV, and so on. It didn't really take that long to find some good deals. I messaged a few people and picked up a few things, and during the process, I found and contacted a seller about buying their TV stand. It was posted for $40 and looked like a super average wooden TV stand. The seller, Matt, was very strict on when I could pick it up, though. It had to be after 9 p.m. because of his work schedule, and it couldn't be on the weekend either. This time frame did work for me, but I found it odd just how specific he was. I figured that was probably why no one had bought it yet. I agreed to pick it up on a Wednesday at 9:30. On that day, I followed through. He sent me his address, and I headed out. It was 30 minutes to his place from mine. The town he lived in, I'd only heard in conversation before, and I'd never actually been to it. I soon found out exactly why. Most of the houses I saw were completely run down and very old. Even the roads were in bad shape, with a lot of the streetlights not even working at all. Pulling up to Matt's house didn't make me feel any better. It was just as run-down looking as all the others, with only what looked like a hallway light on inside. I sorted out $40 and shoved the bills into my pocket, then stepped out and walked onto their porch, ringing the doorbell. As I waited, I looked around at his lawn. He had stuff everywhere, garden statues and strange decorations all throughout his yard, even on the porch as well. Eventually, he opened the door. Matt was a tall and skinnier-looking man, probably in his 40s or so. He had an extremely tired look on his face, as if he hadn't slept in days now, and I could smell the booze oozing from his breath as he welcomed me inside. If I'd known beforehand that this was who I'd be buying from, I never even would have come here, but it was too late for that now. As we walked down the hall, there was various stuff scattered all around the house. Not to the point like a hoarder's home you'd see on TV, but more like an abandoned house that had been trashed by random teenagers. When we got to the living room in the back of the home, he pointed at the TV stand. The room was barely lit at all, making it very hard to see what condition it was in. "Any chance you could turn on the lights for me?" I politely asked him. Matt didn't respond, but walked over to the wall and flicked on a small lamp in the corner. It was at that time that I got a really weird feeling that something was wrong. Before I even got to look at the TV stand, I heard someone else behind me. Another man had come around the corner, now standing next to Matt. He didn't say hello or anything, he just watched me. I was really unsure as to what to make of this. I didn't want to overreact right away, but I was also getting an eerie feeling that was only growing ever larger. I was standing there, trying to think of what to say or do. Matt walked past me and stood in front of the TV stand. They were now on either side of me, not speaking at all. Several long seconds passed as nobody spoke or moved. I quickly shoved my way past the other guy and went down the hallway toward the front door. As I left, I could hear them laughing in the room behind me, like this was a funny joke or something. As I got halfway to my car, the front door slammed shut. I can't even find any reasons for what occurred that night, or what those two guys were trying to do. Maybe it was just some sick joke they were pulling, trying to get me to freak out. Or maybe they had something more sinister planned and decided not to act on it. I don't plan on finding out, though. I was 23 and looking for a studio apartment to rent. I was fresh out of college and had almost no money to work with, only making slightly more than minimum wage. I really needed the absolute cheapest place I could find. At first, I was looking for one bedroom and studios, but over the following weeks, it became apparent that that was just not really in the budget. Reluctantly, I went on Craigslist and looked at their section for housing. I knew this site had a bit of a bad reputation, but one of my friends had had a very good experience and vouched for it. So I decided to give it a go. The first day of looking on Craigslist, I didn't really find anything though. I did get a little bit of hope seeing that there were a lot of listings. They just weren't in my area or price range. I think it was on the third or fourth day when I reloaded the website and found a new listing that piqued my interest. It was for a place a few miles away. I clicked on it and looked at all the details, seeing it was a studio in a small apartment building. The pictures were really low quality, so pixelated I couldn't really make out anything. Everything else seemed perfectly good though. I sent the owner a message and he replied very quickly. We scheduled the tour for later that day, around 7 or so. From our quick back and forth, I saw nothing unusual about this guy. His messages were very professional, and he seemed happy to show me around. A couple hours later, I got in my car and started driving over to the address he'd sent me. I should mention that I knew beforehand this was not a nice area of our city. It was the cheapest area, though, and I honestly didn't think it was that bad. In hindsight, maybe I was just being naive because it was my only option. Anyway, I pulled up to this rather old-looking apartment building. I parked on the side of the street and got out, texting the man that I had arrived and was walking up to the front door. I didn't see the guy anywhere, so I buzzed the room and waited for a few seconds. The door unlocked and I stepped inside, greeted by a staircase in the middle and 2 rooms on either side. Before I even got to looking at the room numbers though, a voice yelled from somewhere above saying they were on the 3rd floor. Assuming this person was talking to me, I started walking up. At this point, I was beginning to wonder why he hadn't met me at the door though, especially when he was so professional when texting. As I reached the top of the steps, there was a small hallway with 2 doors, one of which was open. I walked over and looked inside, seeing a man standing a few feet away and looking over at me. He greeted me and shook my hand, then showed me inside. Immediately, I was very confused though. The place had a couch, TV, chairs, even food on the counters. It was very clearly lived in. "Does someone else live here?" I asked kindly. The man replied with a short laugh and said that no one did, and everything would be gone by tomorrow. I smiled and said okay, but something about that response didn't come off the right way to me. He started leading me further in, pointing out features of the place. It suddenly came across to me that this wasn't even a studio. There were multiple doors which led to other rooms. This was at least a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, and there was no way the price could be what he said it was. It seemed like he noticed my suspicions as he stopped what he was saying and moved toward the hallway. He opened one of the doors that was clearly leading to a bedroom and started telling me to look inside. Before I could answer, we were interrupted when my phone chimed. I pulled it out of my pocket and checked to see who it was. My face went pale, seeing it was the man from Craigslist asking where I was. I looked up in horror, realizing what had happened. I could tell that whoever this guy was in front of me knew that I'd figured out his scheme. The terrifying moment passed, and the man didn't move or say anything. He just stood there and looked at me with a blank stare for a moment. I hurried out of there and down the stairs, not hearing the guy attempt to follow me. I got in my car and left, being so horrified that I never even texted the actual man back, as I was no longer interested in staying anywhere near that place. I didn't know if he was in on it too somehow. Whoever that guy was that lured me into his home was so close to being able to probably abduct me. I don't know, and I don't even want to know. But I never opened Craigslist again after that night. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.